Hello, this is Rabbi Abramson, and Sukkot is coming. When we think of Sukkot, we think of building a sukkah and decorating a sukkah and perhaps eating meals in our sukkah. But the other central ritual of Sukkot is the ritual of lulav and etrog. Now, I must tell you that I never bought anything on eBay in my life. I thought eBay is the place you go to get ripped off, and apparently that's true. Because if you're paying $500 for your lulav and etrog this year, you're probably getting ripped off. This is what we think of when we think of lulav and etrog. Actually, the word lulav refers to this branch, this palm branch, and the word etrog refers to this round yellow fruit. But together, they're referred to as lulav and etrog, but you see that there are more than two items in this picture. There also are myrtle branches and willow branches. So together, these four species are called, in Hebrew, the arba'a minim, the four species, but their common nickname is lulav and etrog, also pronounced in its Ashkenazic pronunciation, lulav and esrog. And here is the biblical basis of the mitzvah of lulav and etrog, taken from Leviticus chapter 23. Ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon, you shall take for yourselves on the first day, that's the first day of the holiday of Sukkot, pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of hadar trees, whatever that means, kapot tamarim, branches of palm trees, va'anaf eitz avot, and boughs of leafy trees, whatever that means, ve'arvei nachal, and willows of the brook. So you shall take these four things: the fruit of the hadar tree, palm branches, boughs of leafy trees, which in Jewish tradition we understand to refer to myrtle branches, and willow branches. And you shall take these four things, and what shall you do with them? And you shall rejoice before Adonai your God for 7 days. Ritually, we take the lulav and the etrog, that is the arba'a minim, the three kinds of branches tied together in one bunch, and the etrog, and we hold them together, and we say a bracha, and then we shake the arba'a minim in 6 directions: forward, to the right, backward, to the left, up, and down, to symbolize that God is everywhere. It's a brief and exotic and perhaps somewhat fun ritual for this holiday of Sukkot. But what does it mean? I mean, beyond the experience of benching lulav and esrog, taking the lulav and etrog, saying the bracha, shaking it in all those directions, beyond that experience, beyond that little ritual, what do the lulav and etrog mean? Well, it's a simple question with a number of rather complicated answers. And what I'd like to do now is to explore with you 6 texts from rabbinic literature, each of which has different interpretations of the lulav and the etrog, different interpretations of the arba'a minim, the 4 species. Here's the first rabbinic text from a midrashic collection called Vayikra Rabbah, or Leviticus Rabbah. And it begins by saying, Davar Acher, another exposition of the text, pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of the hadar tree. I already explained that in Jewish tradition, we understand pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of hadar trees, to refer to that yellow citrus fruit, known, I believe, in English as a citron, but known in Hebrew as an etrog. Pre-eitz hadar, that means etrog. Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hadar symbolizes the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Kadosh Baruch Hu means the Holy Blessed One. It's one of those beautiful rabbinic nicknames for God, the Holy Blessed One. So pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of the hadar tree, that symbolizes the Kadosh Baruch Hu. What does the hadar tree have to do with the Kadosh Baruch Hu? Shekatuv bo v'hadar lavashta, of whom it is written, you are clothed in glory and majesty, hadar. The fruit of the Hadar tree symbolizes God because God is described as clothed in majesty as Hadar. Okay, what about the branches of the palm tree? The text goes on. Kapot tamarim zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Branches of the palm trees likewise symbolizes the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shekatuv bo tzadik katamar yifrach. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. Well, we have the word tamar, we have the word palm tree in this verse from Psalms, but what does that have to do with God? Shekatuv bo tzadik katamar yifrach. Well, here's the word tamar, palm tree, but what does that have to do with God? In this passage from the book of Psalms, we read, Sadiq katamar yifrach, the righteous shall flourish like the palm tree, and no one's more righteous than God. And so Tamar, the palm tree, also symbolizes God. Third of the four species, V'anaf eitz avot, the boughs of leafy trees, Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That too symbolizes the Kadosh Baruch Hu, symbolizes the Holy One. Dichtiv v'hu omed bein hahadasim, of whom it is written, standing among the myrtles. The prophet Zechariah metaphorically describes God as standing among the myrtles. So the boughs of the leafy tree also bring to mind God. And finally, the fourth of the four species, va'arvei nachal, willows of the brook, Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not surprisingly, that too symbolizes God. Dichtiv Bei Solu Larochev Ba'aravot, V'yashamo, of whom it is written, extol God who rides in the clouds, Aravot. Adonai is his name. Arve Nachal, willows of the brook. Aravot means willows, but at least in this verse in Psalms, Aravot is also understood to mean clouds. Aravot, willows, brings to mind the one who rides in the clouds, namely God. And so different verses in biblical literature that links each of the four species to God. Or to put it another way, when we take the Arba'a Minim and we perform the ritual on Sukkot, if each of the Arba'a Minim symbolizes God, we are bringing God into our Sukkot experience. That's the first symbolic explanation of the Lulav and Etrog. And now the second explanation, also from Vayikra Rabbah. In this explanation, each of the four species is understood to refer to one of the patriarchs, or one of the matriarchs, or other biblical characters. So let's jump in. Davar acher pri eitz hadar, another exposition of the text, the fruit of hadar tree. Ze Avraham. Hadar symbolizes Abraham, our patriarch Abraham. Shehidro HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Seva Tova, whom the Kadosh Baruch Hu honored, Hidro, with good old age. Shene'emar v'Avraham zakein ba bayamim, as it is said, Abraham was old, advanced in years. Uchtiv v'hadarta pnei zakein, and it is written, you shall honor v'hadarta, the face of the elderly. Now this explanation is a little bit complicated, so let's go back and follow it step by step. How is it that the Pri Eitz Hadar, that the fruit of the Hadar tree symbolizes Abraham? Because Abraham is described as Zakein, old, elderly. And we are also told in the Torah, V'hadarta, you shall honor or you shall glorify the face of the elderly. Hence, Hadar brings to mind Abraham. Kapot tamarim, the branches, the kapot of palm trees, Ze Yitzchak, that symbolize Isaac. Shahaya kafut v'akud al gabei hamizbeach, because he had been tied, kafut, and bound up upon the altar. With Rosh Hashanah only a week and a half ago, The words of the story of Akedat Yitzchak may still be echoing in our ears, and in that dramatic story, Isaac was tied to an altar as a sacrificial animal, and then at the dramatic end of the story, his life is saved. But what do kapot tamarim, the branches of palm trees, have to do with Isaac and the story of the binding of Isaac? Let's look again at the word kapot, which means branches, and it's similar to the Hebrew word kafut, tied. The kapot, the branches of the palm tree, bring to mind Isaac, who was kafut, who was tied and bound on that altar. Next symbol, va'anaf eitz avot, the boughs of leafy trees. That's the myrtle branches. Ze Yaakov, that symbolizes Jacob. Mahadas ze rachush be'alin, just as a myrtle is crowded with leaves. Kachaya Yaakov rachush bevanim, so Jacob was crowded with children. A myrtle tree has many leaves on each branch. Rachush ba'alin, it's crowded with leaves. And our ancestor Jacob was rachush bevanim, crowded with many children. Finally, the arvei nachal, willows of the brook, ze Yosef, that symbolizes Jacob's son Joseph. Ma'aravazo kumusha lifnei gimel minim halalu, just as the willow wilts before the other three species, kach met Yosef lifnei echav, so Joseph died before his brothers. Anybody who lives through the week of Sukkot and tries various methods to keep the lulav and etrog looking good and looking fresh throughout the week, we know that it's a losing battle, because about halfway through, or maybe 2/3 of the way through the week, the willow is wilting. It's not looking nearly as good as the myrtle branches, and certainly not as good as the palm branch, which will look the same for many, many months if we hold on to it that long. But the willow starts to wilt earlier. So the willow that wilts before the other species brings to mind Joseph, who died before his brothers. But wait, there's more, as they say in those annoying infomercials. Davar acher, another exposition of the text, creates Hadar, the fruit of the Hadar trees, Zo Sarah. That symbolizes Sarah, the first of our matriarchs. Shehidra HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Seva Tova, whom the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, honored, Hidra, with a good old age. Shene'emar v'Avraham v'Sarah Zekenim, as it is said, Abraham and Sarah were Zekenim, they were old, and we already read of our obligation to glorify the face of the old, and so creates Hadar. The fruit of the Hadar tree also brings to mind our matriarch Sarah. Kapot tamarim, the branches of the palm tree, Zo Rivka, that symbolizes Rivka, Rebecca. Ma tamarazo yesh ba ochel v'yesh ba uksim. Just as the palm tree contains eatable fruit as well as thorns. In other words, the palm tree produces something that's good, the fruit, and produces something that's not so good, the thorns. Kach ha'emida Rivka sadik v'rasha. So Rebecca produced something that was good and something that was not so good, namely a righteous son and a wicked son. And so the palm tree brings to mind our matriarch Rebecca. Va'anaf eitz avot, and the boughs of leafy trees, that symbolizes Leah. Mahadas ze rachush be'alin, just as a myrtle is rachush be'alin, is crowded with leaves. Kach hayita Leah ruchusha bevanim. So Leah was crowded with children. And final, the arvei nachal ze Rachel, the willows of the brook symbolize Rachel. Ma arava zo kemusha lifnei gimel haminim, just as the willow wilts before the other three species, as we read above, Kach Rachel meta lifnei achota. So Rachel died before her sister. And so we have symbolic explanations for each of the four species, bringing to mind each of our four matriarchs, or to put it another way, the ritual of the Arba'a Minim brings the patriarchs and the matriarchs into our Sukkot experience. On to the next explanation. Davar Acher, another exposition of the text, also from Vayikra Rabbah. Pre-Eitz Hadar, the fruit of the Hadar tree, Zo Sanhedre Gedolah Shel Yisrael. That symbolizes the great Sanhedrin, the great central Jewish court in Jerusalem. Shehidram HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'seiva tova, whom the Kadosh Baruch Hu honored with good old age. Shene'emar mipnei seiva takum, as it is said, you shall rise before the aged. Now it's true that the word seiva is translated here as aged, but elderly or even elders would be as good a translation. And therefore, Pre-Eitz Hadar symbolizes the Sanhedrin, Shehidram, that God honored them with elder status. They were the leaders of the Jewish community, and therefore the mitzvah, mipnei seiva takum, you shall rise before the aged, or you shall rise before the elders, applied to them as well. Second symbol, kapot tamarim, the branches of palm trees, elu talmidei chachamim, that symbolizes the scholars. Shekofin et atzmam lilmod Torah elu me elu, who compel themselves to learn Torah from each other. Kapot tamarim, the branches of palm trees, brings to mind scholars. Shekofin, who compel. Kapot kofin. You see the pun there. Branches, kapot of palm trees, symbolizes scholars, because kofin, they compel themselves to learn Torah from each other. Next species, va'anaf eitz avot, and boughs of leafy trees, elu shalosha shurot shel talmidim sheyoshvim lifnehem. They symbolizes the 3 rows of disciples who sit before them. How many myrtle branches are in the lulav and etrog set? 3 myrtle branches, bringing to mind the 3 rows of the leading disciples who sat before the teachers. The arvei nachal, and the willows of the brook. Remember, there are 2 willow branches in the lulav and etrog. Elu shnei sofrim shel dayanim. They symbolizes the pair of judges, scribes. In modern course, we would call them the courtroom stenographers. The 2 judges, scribes, she'omdim lifnehem, who stand before them, who stand before the judges, v'chotvim divrei hamazakin v'divrei hamachayvin, and write down the words of those who acquit and the words of those who condemn. So just to review, Pre-Eitz Hadar, the fruit of the Hadar tree, that symbolizes the elders themselves, the members of the great Sanhedrin, who are honored with the status of being elders. The kapot tamarim, the branches of palm trees, symbolizes the students, shekofin et atzman, who force themselves, who compel themselves to learn Torah. Va'anaf eitz avot, the boughs of leafy trees, symbolizes the 3 rows of disciples who sit before the students. The 2 willows of the brook symbolizes the 2 courtroom stenographers that sit and record the proceedings of the court. And so here, the 4 species bring into our Sukkot experience the leaders of the Jewish community. Davar Acher, another exposition, also from Vayikra Rabbah. Pre-Eitz Hadar, Elu Yisrael. The fruit of the hadar tree symbolize Israel. Ma etrog zeh yesh bo ta'am v'yesh bo reach. Just as this etrog has taste as well as fragrance, kach Yisrael yesh behem b'nei adam, sheyesh behem Torah, v'yesh behem ma'asim tovim. So Israel have among them people who possess learning and good deeds. Now, before we proceed through this midrash, let's look at the two categories that it's presenting. There are among the Jews people who possess Torah, people who possess learning, and people who possess ma'asim tovim, people who possess good deeds. Putting aside the question of which is more important, Torah learning or good deeds, of course they're both important, but the fact is that there are people who possess both learning and good deeds. And so Pri'etz Hadar symbolizes those people. But let's keep those two categories in mind. Those who possess Torah, learning, and those who possess Ma'asim Tovim, good deeds. Second symbol, Kapot Tamarim, the branches of palm trees, Elu Yisrael. That too symbolizes Israel. Mahatamara hazo yesh bo ta'am ve'ein bo reach. Just as a palm tree has taste but not fragrance, kach ein Yisrael yesh bahem sheyesh bahem Torah ve'ein bahem ma'asim tovim. So Israel have among them people who possess learning but not good deeds. So let's highlight that category. So there are some Jews who have learning and good deeds, and there are some Jews who possess learning but not good deeds. And the branch of the palm tree symbolizes them. Third symbol, Va'anaf eitz avot elu Yisrael. The boughs of leafy trees also symbolizes some category of Jews. Ma'adas yesh bo reach ve'ein bo ta'am. Just as the myrtle has fragrance but no taste. It has a smell, but it produces no fruit with any taste. Kach Yisrael yesh behem sheyesh behem ma'asim tovim ve'ein behem Torah. So the Jews have among them those who possess good deeds but not learning. So let's highlight that phrase, good deeds but not learning. And the fourth category, V'arvei Nachal, Elu Yisrael, willows of the brook, also applies to Israel. Ma'aravazo, ein ba ta'am ve'ein ba reach, just as the willow has no taste and no fragrance. Kach ein Yisrael yesh bahem b'nei adam, she'ein bahem lo Torah ve'lo ma'asim tovim. So Israel have among them people who possess neither learning nor good deeds. So let's highlight that phrase. So we have four kinds of Jews, each symbolized by one of the Arba'a Minim. There are Jews who have Torah and Ma'asim Tovim. There are Jews who have filled their lives with plenty of learning and many, many good deeds. There are Jews who have learning but not good deeds. There are Jews who have good deeds but not learning. And there are Jews who have neither learning nor good deeds. But the Midrash isn't over. Uma HaKadosh Baruch Hu oseh lahem. What then does the Kadosh Baruch Hu do to these different kinds of Jews? The ones who have good deeds and learning, the ones who have good deeds and no learning, the ones who have learning and no good deeds, the ones who have no learning and no good deeds. What does the Kadosh Baruch Hu do to all of them? La'abdam i'efshar. To destroy them, it's impossible. There are some Jews who don't have enough good deeds in their lives. Shame on them. But is God going to destroy all such Jews? That's impossible. There are Jews who don't have a whole lot of learning. I won't even say shame on them. Maybe some such Jews never had the opportunity to learn much about Judaism. Is God going to destroy them for that? Of course not. So God is not about to even consider destroying these different categories of Jews. Ella Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Yuksharu kulam aguda achat. Let them all be bound together in one group. Vehem mechaprin elu al elu. And these will atone for those, and they will atone one for another. Let all of them be bound together in one group. This kind of Jew and that kind of Jew, these Jews who have these Jewish strengths, those Jews who have those Jewish strengths. Let them be bound together in one group as we hold together and bind together the Arba'a Minim on Sukkot, and they'll balance each other. The more learned Jews perhaps will balance the less learned Jews. The Jews with more good deeds will help to balance the Jews with fewer good deeds. When all of those different kind of Jews are gathered together, are united together, they will atone for one another. Oh, and the Midrash goes on, V'im asitem kach, ota sha'a ani mit'aleh. If you have done so, says God, then at that instant I am exalted. Ve'ematai hu mit'aleh. When is God exalted? Kishehein asuyin aguda achat. When they are made into one group. Lefichach Moshe Mazhir Yisrael. Therefore, Moses exhorted Israel with the first words of the mitzvah of Lulav and Etrog, Ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon. On the first day you shall take. So each of the Arba Aminim symbolizes another kind of Jew. And this Midrash makes a statement about inclusiveness, about how God wants to include all different kinds of Jews, and the challenge to us to be unified, to bring ourselves together, to bring different kinds of Jews together, just as we bring the Arba'a Minim together on Sukkot. And when we do that, God will be exalted. Next explanation, each of the Arba'a Minim symbolizes a different part of the human body. Rabbi Mani patach kol atzmotai tomarna Adonai micha mocha. Rabbi Mani opened his discourse with the text from the book of Psalms, all my bones shall say, Adonai, who is like you? Lo ne'emar pasuk ze ela yishvil lulav. Rabbi Mani explains that this verse was said in allusion only to the lulav. V'shidrash lulav domeh l'shidrash adam. The rib of the lulav resembles the human spine. V'hadas domeh la'ain. The myrtle resembles the eye. The shape of the myrtle leaf is similar to the shape of the human eye. V'arava domeh la'peh. The willow resembles the mouth. If you look at the leaf of a willow, it resembles a pair of lips, at least if you use your imagination. The etrog domeh lalev, and the etrog resembles the human heart, also if you use your imagination. Thus, each of the Arba'a Minim resembles part of the human body. The lulav, the human spine, the myrtle, the eye, the willow, the mouth, the etrog, the heart, heve kol atzmotai tomarna. And this explains why the book of Psalms says, all my bones, or all the parts of my body, or all my organs shall say to you, Adonai micha mocha. Adonai, who is like you? I think the lesson of this midrash is that our connection with God should not be simply cerebral, should not be simply theological, but should go beyond that. Our devotion to God should involve our heads, yes, but our hearts no less. The other day I heard a line in Steven Spielberg's movie Lincoln, in which the president, speaking of General Grant, said, "My faith in him is marrow deep." What a striking line. I don't know if President Lincoln actually said that or if the screenwriter simply wrote it, but what an amazing thing. My trust in him is marrow deep. Can each of us say, my faith in God is marrow deep? Not only my mind praises God, but deep inside me, marrow deep, I praise God. Kol asmotai tomarna, Adonai mi chamocha. All my bones, all my parts, not just one part of myself, but all my parts of my psychological and spiritual self shall say, Adonai mi chamocha, Adonai, who is like you. So by comparing the Arba'a Minim to the different parts of ourselves, we are being challenged to praise God in many, many ways and with different parts of ourselves. And now the final Midrashic explanation, which explains not each of the four specific symbolisms of each of the four species, but rather the reason in the broadest sense, the reason for the mitzvah of lulav and etrog. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi patach Shema b'ni v'kach amarai. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, opened his discourse with the text, "Hear, my son, and take in my words." But that's just Rabbi Yehuda's introduction. His real lesson begins in the second line. Harbe kichot tziviti etchem, yishvil li zchutchem. I have commanded you, says God, concerning many acts of taking to benefit you. Now we're going to have to slow down a little bit to parse this verse and these lessons. I have commanded you concerning many kichot, many takings for your benefit. There are numerous commandments that I have given you that involve my telling you to take something, and those mitzvot are all for your benefit. Amarti aleichem vaychu elecha fara aduma temima. For example, I said to you, take for yourself a red heifer without blemish. This is a very long and complicated and mysterious mitzvah involving the para aduma, the red heifer, a sacrificial animal whose ashes, when mixed with other ingredients, becomes a spiritual concoction which has the power litaher et hatamei, to purify the impure, and litamei et hatahor, and to impurify the pure. And that verse begins with the phrase, Vayikhu eilecha fara aduma. Take for yourself a red heifer. But God goes on with a rhetorical question. Shema bishvili, was this perhaps for me? Ela bishvilchem litaher etchem. No, it was for you, to purify you. I didn't give you this mitzvah for my sake. I said, Vayikhu eilecha, take for yourself this red heifer. I gave you this mitzvah for your benefit. Dichtiv hizah tahor al hatamei, as it is written, the tahor person shall sprinkle upon the tamei person. Next example. Amarti lachem vaychuli teruma. I said to you, let them take for me an offering. This is the beginning of a long section of the Torah in which the Israelites are first told, vayikhu, let them take for me an offering. What is the offering? What is it that Moses is instructed to gather offerings from the Israelites for? For the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and all the other trappings of the sacrificial system that will be established there in the desert as the Israelites are being led in the desert by Moses. Centuries later, the Mishkan will be replaced by the temple in Jerusalem. But in the meantime, this portable temple is for the benefit of the Israelites. But this mitzvah, the mitzvah of gathering the supplies for the construction of the Mishkan, begin with the phrase, Vayikhu li teruma, let them take for me an offering. But God goes on in God's explanation, Vishvil she'edor beinechem. I told you to take for me this offering to build the Mishkan with the view that I would dwell among you. As I said, Va'asuli mikdash, and of course the full verse is, Va'asuli mikdash, let them make for me a sanctuary, Vishachanti betocham, so that I will dwell in their midst. The Israelites are told, Vayikhu li teruma, let them take for me an offering for their own benefit. The benefit is that God's presence will be felt in the midst of the Israelite community. The Midrash continues, Kivyachol Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Kadosh Baruch Hu said, so to speak, Kachu oti v'ador beinechem. Kachu, take me, and I shall dwell among them. Vayichu truma eino omer. It does not say, let them take an offering, ella vayichu li. Rather, let them take for me an offering. Oti atem lokrim. God says with some poignancy, it is I whom you take. When I tell you, take an offering, collect the materials to build the Mishkan, what I'm really saying is, take me, bring me into your lives. Build the Mishkan so that my presence will be felt in your lives. Next mitzvah. Amarti lachem vaychu elecha shemen zayit zach. I said to you, bring to you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting. The Israelites are being instructed to gather pure olive oil for lighting the lights in the Mishkan. So God asks, V'chi ora shelachem ani tzarich? But do I require your light? Of course God doesn't require light. You and I require light. If we don't have light, we bump into things. God doesn't require light. Ela bishvil lizchutchem. Rather, it is only in order to make you worthy that I told you to gather this oil for these lights. The whole point of building the Mishkan is to benefit you. And so even the oil which is gathered for the lighting within the Mishkan, even that is for your benefit. Another example, the time when God said, Vayikhu, also for the Israelites' benefit. V'achshav, and now we're going to come to our mitzvah, the mitzvah ve'arba'a minim. V'achshav she'amarti lachem ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon, and when I told you, you shall take for yourselves on the first day, kedei lizchutchem. I commanded you to do this in order to make you worthy of divine favor. Kenei she'orid lachem matar, so that I may bring down rain for you. Following your celebration of Sukkot, this fall harvest festival, the rains of the rainy season will begin. And that's what's going to make possible the spring harvest, and so on. It's for your benefit that I command you to celebrate Sukkot. L'chach Moshe mazhir liYisrael. For this reason, Moses exhorts Israel, Ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon. You shall take for yourselves on the first day. What wonderful lessons we've derived from these different discussions of the symbolism of the lulav and etrog, the symbolism of the arba'a minim. We've seen that they symbolize the Kadosh Baruch Hu, they symbolize God, in a sense bringing God into our experience of Sukkot. They symbolize our patriarchs and matriarchs and other biblical characters, bringing our important ancestors into our Sukkot experience. They symbolize the leaders of the Jewish community. They symbolize different kinds of Jews. They symbolize different parts of the human body, challenging us to praise God with different aspects of ourselves. And finally, the last lengthy and complicated explanation would suggest that this mitzvah, like many others, was given to Israel not for God's benefit, but for our benefit. One of the greetings that we give one another on our major festivals is Chag Sameach, happy holiday. And so I surely wish you a Chag Sameach, a happy holiday as Sukkot approaches, but also a very meaningful holiday.